Throughout the Bible, God is revealed as a powerful, consistent, and deeply relational figure. But how is God depicted similarly in both the Old and New Testaments? Let's explore 5 key similarities that show us how the same God is woven throughout the entire biblical narrative. First, and most importantly, both testaments declare one foundational truth: there is only one God. The Old Testament introduces this in verses like Deuteronomy 6 verse 4, which says, "The Lord our God, the Lord is one." And in the New Testament, this belief is affirmed by Jesus himself in Mark 12 verse 29. This monotheistic foundation reveals that God is the creator and sustainer of everything, showing consistent sovereignty over creation, history, and salvation. In both testaments, God's holiness is central. In the Old Testament, God's holiness is emphasized through laws, purity codes, and rituals. Think of books like Leviticus, where God's moral perfection is the standard for how his people should live. And in the New Testament, this theme carries on. 1 Peter 1 verse 16 reminds believers, "Be holy, because I am holy." Holiness wasn't just a requirement under the law, it's an ongoing call for those who follow Christ. One of the most powerful themes tying the Old and New Testaments together is the idea of covenant, a relationship agreement between God and his people. In the Old Testament, we see covenants with Abraham, Moses, and David, where God promises blessings in return for faith and obedience. But in the New Testament, we see the culmination of this covenant relationship. Through Jesus, God establishes a new and eternal covenant based on grace, not just the law. As Luke 22 verse 20 says, Jesus declared, "This cup is the new covenant in my blood." While the Old Testament is often associated with God's justice, don't miss how frequently it highlights his mercy. Take Exodus 34 verse 6, where God is described as compassionate and gracious, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness. This is echoed beautifully in the New Testament through Jesus' ministry. The parable of the prodigal son in Luke 15 shows us that God's mercy is at the heart of who he is. Jesus reveals that God is not just merciful to a chosen nation, but to all people willing to return to him. Both testaments depict God as a righteous judge. In the Old Testament, God's judgment often takes the form of immediate consequences, such as the exile of Israel due to disobedience. But judgment isn't just about punishment, it's about accountability and setting things right. In the New Testament, judgment is expanded to a final, eternal event. The book of Revelation, particularly Revelation 20 verses 11 to 15, paints a vivid picture of a final judgment, where God will bring ultimate justice to the world. But through Jesus, believers have the hope of salvation and mercy on that day. From Genesis to Revelation, God is consistent in his character, holy, just, merciful, and deeply committed to relationships with humanity. The Old and New Testaments may highlight different aspects of his nature, but together, they reveal one unified message: a God who is just, loving, and calling us into eternal relationship with him.